Hello and welcome back to the Nerd Theorists. This is part 3 of my little series where I've been taking a look at the Idol of Shobik from Mantic Games' Kings of War. So this is, like I said, part 3 where I will be painting the model. Last week we released my build of it, and to be fair, I am a little bit nervous because all cards on the table, this is in fact only the third unit I have ever painted. Ever from any system. So yeah, I really hope I like the finished result in this, but if you like any of the kind of finished result of what I do on this, then if you like that, then believe me, you can do it too. So stick around and let's find out. Here we are, we start off then painting the majority of Shobik in Pallid Bone Speed Paint from Army Painter. I start off painting this, what I've referred to now as the halo, just giving a generally good layer of the speed paint all over it basically. Give it a good coating, making sure that plenty of the paint gets into those recesses where the lettering is to really allow them to highlight out. As you see there, I just saw a little bit of the resin support struts that I just needed to trim off. And then just carry on and do very much the same on Shobik itself, on the main torso area. Just, yeah, plenty of the speed paint on a good coating all round, making sure it fits into all those recesses, into all those cracks in the torso, because I think this is a great way of basing, especially with this kind of colour. It makes it very much look like that kind of sandstone effect that we're going to be going with this. I will be doing exactly the same for the legs as well. As one thing I wasn't entirely sure about before I even started was what I was going to do with the weapons, his sickles he's got in each hand. Now what I ended up doing was giving it a bit of a paint with this speed paint, especially for the kind of the main part of it, and I actually did for around the top edge as well of it, just to kind of give it that kind of stony look. But I think in the end I did change my mind on what I was going to do with that part way through. Does everybody actually have a set plan? You tell me, do you actually know exactly what you're doing before you start, or do you ever change your mind part way through? Please let me know in the comments. Here we are, we're now moving on to Ushabti Bone. Now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to dry brush. Now I'm going to give it a heavy dry brush, and what I'm doing is I'm giving it kind of that sun bleached look. That's the idea I'm going with. So I'm actually, with the dry brush, I'm directionally dry brushing, so only going top down to try and give it that kind of sun bleached effect. And I'll do this all over where we've already painted the pallid bone. And then I actually move on to doing some edge highlighting in white. I did in fact forget to hold up the bottle, but it is White Scar from Citadel. So all I was doing was trying to just edge highlight all those top edges to really kind of make those edges kind of pop and make it a little bit more sun bleached on those kind of top areas. But what I actually ended up doing as well as is not just doing a straight edge highlight, because I was ever so slightly watering down the white as I was going. So this would allow me, you may notice that as I put down some of those edge highlights, I then rub it with my finger just to smudge it that little bit, to kind of prevent it from looking just like a brush stroke and more of an area of white which kind of fades out as you go in the direction that you've smudged your finger in, which I think worked rather well. To say that I was kind of making it up as I go along, but I think it worked. Tell us what you think. with the edge highlighting done, I declared that texture finished, so that I'm moving on to an Eshin Grey. Now with this particular head that I'm using, which is that kind of an ancient god look, that very typical, like Anubis from ancient Egypt, that kind of look. So I was going to do the head and the other kind of recessed areas around the neck, which is kind of like armour. I don't know if you'd call it armour, but in this Eshin Grey, as you can see here. Now I did water down the Eshin Grey just a little bit to give it kind of a very thin coat, so I did need to give it 2 thin coats of this to not give it that nice even coverage without kind of filling in any of those details too much. As I said before, moving on to the jackal head, doing exactly the same again, 2 very thin coats of the Eshin Grey all over. With the Eshin Grey done, it is clearly grey. So what I was going to do was move on to good old Nuln Oil. Talent in a bottle. So yeah, going over everywhere you've just put the Eshin Grey. Now, I know you are really looking for that kind of black look. The reason why I didn't go straight for black is purely so that once we've put this Nuln Oil on, so help that sit in the recesses and make those recesses look darker than the rest of it. So if you went straight for black, you would lose that kind of definition in those recesses in there. So that's why I went for the grey rather than straight for a black. And again, same again with the head. Nuln Oil all over. Then we lighten up the grey. We're going for Administratum Grey from Citadel. So what I've done since I actually stopped recording is I actually changed my mind on what I want to do with these weapons. As you can see here, I've actually painted the blades in exactly the same way with the Eshin Grey and Nuln Oil over the top, which I think looks amazing. So, like I say, I'm going to, at the back of the neck just there, I'm going to be putting some of the Administratum Grey, and the smaller areas at the front I'm going to leave exactly as they are. So what I'll do is use my dry brush just to stipple on the Administratum Grey, just to try and give it that kind of gradient kind of look to it and not be too blocky. And then use the dry brush again just to dry brush over the jackal head. Again, stippling on the back of the neck there just to make it look even. Then onto the weapons, again, just using that stippling effect to try and lighten it up towards the tip of the blade itself. Which even now I think is starting to look really good. So now I pick out the Ulthuan Grey, again another Citadel colour. The idea here is again light, another step lighter on that grey, again going to the dry brush and stippling in back of the neck, just right in the middle, just again just make it lighter just in the middle, and on the blades just a little bit on the edges, on that tip of the blade there, so just make it look like that gradient going from black to mid grey into light grey at the end there. And then for the head, I don't dry brush it, I do the edge highlighting. Moving on to this very old looking bottle of Retributor armour, which no longer really seals properly, so I think let's sort that out. So with this, I'm actually doing all the bits around the neck area which I've not currently painted to give it that really great contrast between that black and the gold that you're putting down. Again, this is just a colour scheme that I've decided to go with. It's entirely up to you how you would want to go and do it, but I think this looks really good. And then again, slight change of mind, I paint that last bit of the actual blade itself, which I've not painted in the grey shades, in the Retributor armour, as well as just to show out that it does have metal on there as well. But I want it to be gold rather than actually any other kind of more boring metallics, shall we say. Because I really do love that contrast that we're getting. Then I move on to, again, using the Retributor armour on his sporran. I know, before everybody says, I know it's not an actual sporran, because it's clearly not from the sporran region of Scotland. It's clearly just a sparkling man purse. Right, moving off of the Citadel paints, going back to a speed paint, going on to Hive Dweller Purple. Now this is going to be the cloth of his, well, let's just call it the cloth. I hate to call it a kilt or skirt, because, one way or another I'd be wrong. Just, again, give it a good coat all over. The trick here, because the speed paints are so thin, I was worried that it might run down onto his legs. So I was trying to do it a very thin coat. But I'm really impressed with these speed paints. They do give really good coverage all over. You don't need to be too heavy-handed with it. You still have to be very careful to make sure it doesn't run anywhere, because like with any kind of contrast or speed paints, they do tend to run a little bit, or pool in places you might not want them to. You just have to be careful of that. But with one coat done, it looked really good as it is. but I decided that I wanted to have a second coat. You may, if you were using the speed paints on here, you may want to just leave it as one coat, but I wanted that really deep purple kind of look to it. And so yeah, I put on another thin coat of it again. Like I say, it wasn't necessary, it did look really good as it was, but it's just the kind of look that I wanted to go with. And to be honest, I'm really glad I did. I think it turned out really well. You can still see a lot of the kind of recesses on that cloth. So then I moved on to kind of highlighting the cloth, and I wasn't decided on which colour to go with, but I went with the Demonette Hide. So getting my smaller spotting brush out and just doing those edge highlights. With the occasional smudge here and there. Now I'm picking out another shade, it's Reichland Flesh Shade. The idea here was to go over the pseudosporin as in those kind of recesses, put that in there to try and kind of deepen that area and try and make it different from those kind of more raised areas on there, which I'm not 100% certain whether it worked very well. I mean, it did to some degree. It clearly does make a difference as you're kind of putting it on, but then as you're kind of just glancing at it in general, you can't tell a massive difference. So I don't know if you have any kind of hints and tips as to how I might improve on doing that or change the effect on that. I don't know. Which it might be where kind of colour blending might actually come in on the palette before I start painting. But again, that's not a technique I've actually tried much of at the moment, so maybe next time. This is what I tend to do on all of my Empire of Dust, is get the Warpstone glow out just to put a dab into the eyes. Now what I do is I really water it down on my palette, so just a dab into the eye, just to let it pool in there. Now I did accidentally overspill ever so slightly, and I thought, well, I'll dab it away, and made it worse. So I just off screen used a bit of tissue or kitchen roll, whatever you have to hand, just to mop up the excess, but otherwise it sat in there beautifully. It came out very nicely once it comes into focus. It's not something you have to do, it's like I say, it's just the kind of colour scheme and theme that I've been running with. And there it is, finished. And I absolutely love how it's turned out. Yeah, I'm really, really pleased with this and couldn't be happier. Well, that's it. And here it is. There we go. In all of its absolute glory. And I am well chuffed with how it's turned out. Honestly, I am absolutely amazed. I mean, I didn't use any kind of particularly advanced techniques on that. Everything that's pretty easily done. I didn't do any colour mixing. Yeah, pretty much all the colours were just straight out the pot. So, yeah, as I've said at the start, if you like the finished result on this, which I do, I'm well pleased, then you can definitely do the same with this. Thank you very much for sticking around and watching through my journey in unboxing, building and painting the Idol of Shobik. So if you like what you see, give us a like, a subscribe, and we'll see you next time for more Mantic Games fun.